What's going on, everyone? I'm Travis Brown with The Eagle alongside Eagle sports editor Robert Cessna. And we also have our special guest, Emily Adams of the Greenville News, covers South Carolina. Emily, how's it going? How's all the preparations gearing up for another game weekend?
Yeah, going good. Can't complain too much here. It's a busy few weeks in Columbia for us. We're at Mizzou last weekend. Women's basketball gets kicked off in Paris next week. So it's a busy month here, but yeah, excited for my first trip down to College Station. I've obviously heard a lot about it, so looking forward to that.
Well, first off, you buried the lead there. Are you getting to go to Paris with the women's basketball team?
I sure am. Yeah, I'm in time zones like crazy over the next few weeks. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, I can't complain about that
Very cool. Very cool. Well, you got to check out our coverage of that. Before then, though, let's get into a little bit of the football game this weekend. What are some of the biggest storylines for the Gamecocks coming into the weekend this weekend in Kyle Field?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one for them is just the injury issues that they're dealing with. I mean, Shane Beamer said in his press conference Tuesday, he has never seen a single position group be as affected by injuries as their offensive line room has this year. I think we're up to 11 guys now have had an injury designation at some point during the season. 3 of those are season-ending injuries. One of them is not definitely season-ending, but we're pretty sure is going to be. So, I mean, they've just been absolutely rocked on that front. They also might be down all 3 starting wide receivers. 2 of them are questionable, and one is definitely out. They've had injuries in just about every key position this year. So I think that's their big question, is whether they're going to be able to field a full team of starters. And I think the other thing is, their bowl eligibility hopes are getting further and further away the more games that they lose here. This back half of the schedule is not easy. They have, a couple of layups at the beginning of November and then end on Kentucky and Clemson. So, if they can't pick up a win here, those last 2 games, suddenly you have to sweep November or, you're going to be done.
Yeah, you mentioned the offensive line. What does that offensive line look like now coming into the weekend against an A&M defensive front that has been pretty good at getting to the quarterback?
Yeah, what a good question. I think they wish they knew. I think we wish we knew. Right now, there's 3 guys who started against Missouri who are 3 guys who should start that are questionable. Vershawn Lee, who's their right tackle, Trovon Baugh, who's a true freshman at right guard, and Tree Babalade, also a true freshman at left tackle. So the only healthy guys are left guard and center. And neither of those guys were starting at those positions at the start of the year. They actually completely retooled the offensive lineup during the bye week, moved Lee from center, where he started the year, out to tackle, moved Nick Gargiulio to center, and then added Trey Jones in at right guard. But I mean, if all 3 of those guys are out, or even, 1 or 2 of them, they really don't have many backups left that are healthy. Ja'Kai Moore has been banged up. He's probably their most versatile backup left, so I would expect to see him slot in. But, his health is a little bit of a question mark. Sidney Fugar and Tyshawn Wanamaker have both played a little bit of tackle, but neither have played particularly well. So, yeah, it's a huge question mark for, I think, even internally with the program of who they're going to be able to put out there on Saturday.
What's Spencer Rattler's confidence level when you're talking about receivers being out? He was such a coup when South Carolina got him. He's got great numbers, did well last year. What's his pulse?
Yeah, I mean, he's been incredible this year, especially considering the amount of pressure that he's under pretty much constantly. You've seen those accuracy numbers and things that were super, super high, like in the high 70s and 80s early in the season, drop off a little bit as the receivers have gotten hurt. And I think that's, mostly just a product of him not being as comfortable with some of these younger guys. But they have other talent in the wide receiver room. Nick Harbor was a 5-star, obviously, was a huge get for Shane Beamer in the portal. And he and Spencer have had a pretty decent rapport so far. Same thing with Omega Blake, who's a sophomore. But he's been remarkably poised, I think, in spite of, he's taken 30 sacks in 7 games. Took 6 last week at Missouri, took 6 at Tennessee, took 9 against North Carolina. And I mean, he just keeps coming out and performing, and it's been really impressive with him. I think he is the only reason that they have the 2 wins that they have, and he's the only reason that some of these games haven't been much bigger blowouts than they were.
What about on the other side? When I'm looking in the outside in on South Carolina, it's kind of surprised at their poor defensive numbers. What are the problems on defense?
Yeah, it's been a really weird year defensively for them. And I think it starts on the front, specifically at the edge position. They lost Jordan Birch, who was a 5-star, to the transfer portal. He's now at Oregon and having a much better year than he ever had at South Carolina. But, they just really don't have guys who are able to get pressure on the quarterback. So it's starting there. And then that's putting the secondary in a really tough spot. They've got 2 really strong safeties in Nicky Newari and DQ Smith, both of whom started last year as true freshmen. But they've been having to, line up in the slot a lot. They've been, out in coverage, and neither of them are particularly strong there. So they've been getting beat by elite wide receivers a lot. Luther Burden had 90-some yards on him last week. Tulu Griffin at Mississippi State had I believe, a program record for single game receiving yards with 250 some. They just are really having a hard time at every level. And occasionally they're able to make adjustments sort of after halftime and figure things out, but they're not able to keep them in games if the offense isn't working. And even if the offense is working, a lot of times, that the defense has given up so much that the offense isn't able to compensate.
What's Xavier Legette's status? I know he's been a little bit banged up this season. Is he going to be good to go this weekend?
Yeah, we will hopefully get an answer on that tonight when Shea Beaver has his call-in show. He was questionable as of Tuesday. He's got an upper body injury. It looked like, from our vantage point at Mizzou, like a left hand or wrist of some sort. And it was on a kick return coverage. So, they've been using him a lot on special teams, which is a questionable decision, I think. But yeah, I think he will try to go if there's any chance of him going. He's, really physical, really, tough, hardworking type of, just a football player type of guy. So I think he will be out there if there's any way he can be, but it also wouldn't shock me if they hold him out to try to protect him for, that Kentucky and Clemson game down the line. Yeah,
he special teams was such a huge factor in the game last year that South Carolina won. If they're using him so much on special teams, what does that special teams units looked like so far this season?
Yeah, that's been sort of the other big surprise of the season. The special teams has not been particularly special compared to what it was last year. They haven't been able to run those trick plays as successfully as they were last year. You're not seeing huge returns. And a lot of that is they graduated a lot of top guys who were playing in protection on returns, on, field goals and punts and things like that. And they're replacing them with a lot of true freshmen and, redshirt guys from last year. And so the execution just hasn't been there the way that you expect. Kai Kroger was having some weird issues with his drop. So his punting was a little bit off for a while, and he was such a, anchor for them last year, came into the season as a preseason All-American. But yeah, I mean, Mitch Jeter has really been sort of their saving grace on the special teams. He's their place kicker, went 4 of 5 on field goals, scored all of their points against Mizzou last week. And he's been really, really consistent hitting touchbacks on kickoffs, which, with the returner A&M has in the back pocket is going to be, I think, a big deal this weekend.
What about Shane Beamer? He brought such a high energy to that program. 2 great years. What's his pulse? I know that he's not on a hot seat or anything like that, but he just seems such a high energy guy. This has to be really eating him up, having all these injuries and no production.
Yeah, I think the really challenging thing for them right now is that they did overachieve so much in his first 2 years. That year coming off of Will Muschamp's, got fired with a few games left in the year. They ended up going 2-8. Nobody thought they were making a bowl game in year one. They win the bowl game. And then to win 8 games last year, and specifically to win 8 games the way that they did it set the expectation, I think, frankly, too high for this year. This was always going to be sort of a come down year for them. They're transitioning between a lot of, really experienced veterans into, Shane's big recruiting classes, which is what he's known for. But those guys are talented. They just aren't necessarily ready to play at the college level right now. And I think you're seeing that translate, especially, with those two true freshmen they're having to start on the offensive line. So I think it's just been disappointing for them and for Shane, especially because I think they thought they were going to be much better this year. They did not see the season going like this preseason. And now they're sort of having to grapple with the fact that a lot of those goals that they had are not necessarily attainable anymore, and trying to recalibrate that at this point in the year with the injuries, which really is out of your control for the most part, I think has been a real challenge. I think the Spirits are still good, but they're definitely not where they were in August.
So heading into the game this week, what are some of your keys to the game? What does South Carolina need to do to be successful? Or is there any kind of prime matchups you're looking at for Texas A&M and South Carolina?
Yeah, I think, the big key both for the offense and the defense is going to be quarterback pressure. I think with Spencer, he struggles the more pressure he's under, obviously, has been really good with pressure regardless, but he starts to get risky with taking sacks and things like that the more the pressure is coming. They've been in a lot of 3rd and long situations where you can tell he's just trying to make a play. He's trying to pick up the first down. He's trying to keep it moving forward and ends up taking, a sack for -6, -7 and putting them in a 4th and long. That's not doable. So, I think if they can slow down Cooper, who has just been tearing up the opposing fronts, I think they just have to give him time to get the ball out and to get the run game going, especially, which was something that struggled in the first half against Mizzou. And then on the defensive side, it seems like from what I've seen, Max Johnson is a bit more of a true pocket passer, not a huge runner or scrambler threat on the ground. And Will Rogers of Mississippi State is kind of similar in that way. And they got 3 sacks on him, but he also passed for 460 some yards. So I think that's going to be their big thing, is sort of getting pressure early and often. That helps the secondary, obviously, as well. And I don't know if that's something that they're capable of, but I think that's the only way that they sort of find a way out of this game.
Exactly. Well, before we let you go, be sure, if you could, tell the people here where to find your work and where to find you on social media.
Yeah, my writing is all at greenvilleonline.com. And then I also post most of my work on Twitter as well at EAAdams6. That'll be football most of the time, but basketball season's kicking off too with the crossover, so there's been a lot of that on the feed as well.
Oh, hey, and I mean, if you want to follow all of her adventures in Paris, Yeah,
that's the Emily in Paris joke has been made several times.
If she wants to come down early, she can take a day and go to Paris, Texas. So that way she can be in both Parises.
That's not something that you want to do. Anyway, well, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for all y'all for watching this. If you're watching it on theeagle.com or if you're listening to on the My Aggie Nation podcast, thank you so much. We'll be back next week with more Texas A&M athletic news.